Yes, it's 2 o'clock on this warm summer day in Copenhagen. So welcome to this digital event with BioPorto. My name is Henrik Ekman. I'm equity analyst here at HC Andersen Capital. And with me today, I have the management team of BioPorto, streaming from US, CEO Tony Perret and CFO Neil Coleman. Before we kick off this special Q&A event, as we have called it, just a quick reminder of the format. Feel free to forward your questions in the chat, and I will do my best to try and forward them to Neil and Tony. And as always, we will broadcast this on our platforms as well afterwards. So with that, it's been a very it has happened a lot in the company recently, and of course the big announcement from yesterday night is of great importance both to the company and to the investors. So with that, please take us through this very positive announcement from yesterday, Tony.
Sure. So for those that have seen, we put out a release indicating that we have met our targeted enrollment numbers for our third part of our third trial out of a three-part clinical trial series. And what that means is we've put a lot of risk behind us. You may remember in the past, the company has announced delays in enrollment due to COVID, due to the pandemic. And it was difficult to get the samples that we needed in order to perform our clinical analysis. I'm happy to say that we have taken that element of risk, out of the equation now, and that is now behind us. And really, the focus now is to analyze the data, finish analyzing the data, I should say, and complete the submission to the FDA. And I'm very happy with the team, with our clinical trial partners for making this possible, and look forward to finally assembling this package.
Good to hear. So of course, this is one of the major milestones for you as a company and as a new management team. So try to take us through what will happen now from here on and until later this year, where you're about to make the application.
Sure. Let me talk a little bit about the clinical analysis that is required. So since there is no gold standard out there today for NGAL, you have to look at a number of factors to determine whether the patient actually had NGAL or not, and then compare that to what was the result that was received on the NGAL test. So what we're looking at is not only the serum creatinine levels, which is the standard of care, which is a very poor standard of care. It has a very low sensitivity, low specificity. So we look at that, we look at urine output, we look at the way the patient presented themselves, whether they were put on renal replacement therapy or not. All of that requires a clinical judgment. So we have clinical partners that we work with to perform that clinical judgment to determine whether or not that patient actually had AKI. And then from that, we can compare to what the NGAL result was. The only true gold standard out there is a biopsy, which means, after the patient has died, you can, perform a biopsy on the kidney. That's unfortunately, or fortunately, that's not the way, we perform our clinical trials. So that will take a level of time to actually complete that. We are also in parallel continuing to perform our validation testing, our analytical testing, and preparing the files that are required for the FDA submission.
Okay. But okay, can you be more specific as to which sort of data you're looking for in this analysis process in terms of efficacy of the testing? Just to because I know you mentioned earlier that the interim readout from some of these some of these studies has been positive, and it's just to what sort of data are you looking for?
Sure. So we take multiple NGAL samples. So we take many times the patient will have an NGAL level that has already been recorded as their baseline, and then we take a sample at the time they are registered into the ICU to make a risk assessment as to whether the NGAL levels have risen, and then we'll take a sample downstream. It could be after the patient is discharged to see whether there was an improvement. So multiple NGAL levels. Again, serum creatinine, which is a standard of care for measuring kidney injury, and then urine output, and then whether in the types of medications that the patient may have been on. There's tens of variables that we look at in order to make this determination. Ultimately, it's up to a clinician. We have a number of clinicians working with us that will make the decision that this patient had AKI. They are blind to the NGAL levels, right? So they're telling us whether the patient had AKI, and then we look at our principal investigators at the various sites to compare that and say yes or no, the NGAL test picked up on this fact or not.
And in this process, are you in dialogue with FDA, or is it that just after when you have submitted your application of the data?
Yeah, so we don't share the data with the FDA until we actually make the submission. However, to be very clear, what's different about this time versus past submissions is that there is complete alignment with the FDA on the design of the trials, the type of data that needed to be collected, and what would constitute a AKI, through the test of NGAL. So we have complete alignment with them in terms of how this study was to progress and the type of data that they needed to see. That being said, if we don't see the quality of data that we believe or provides us with a high level of confidence that the FDA is going to approve a submission, we won't submit. We won't submit, and we'll go back to our principal investigator partners, our clinical partners, to see how we recover from that. There's nothing that tells me that that's going to be the case, but you'll know or not whether we have very good data by whether we submit or not.
Yeah, and that comment about the communication with the FDA and your earlier question, Henrik, about the kind of test performance that we're looking for, where those really come together and are important to understand is, as Tony said from the beginning, the current standard of care is recognized globally by clinicians as not being great. So when if you will, the bar is not great, you don't want a test that does great relative to a not so great bar. You want something that is different because it's better.
Right.
And that's certainly something that our medical and regulatory team and the FDA are aligned on when Tony talks about that alignment from the pre-submission meetings.
Right. And these additional data elements, were reviewed with the FDA, so they know exactly what data we are collecting and how we will make the determination.
Then there is a clarification question. I know there's been some confusion yesterday evening and this morning regarding when is the latest date for your submission to FDA? So
our guidance right now is by Q4, right? That means by the end of the absolute end of the year, our anticipation is that we'll make the submission. Will we make the submission earlier if we can? Absolutely, right? But it's, these things take some time, and I wanted to make sure that we set guidance that was reasonable, but not overly conservative.
Okay. Then there is also a question relating to sort of the reading of the trial data. If if it says if some of the patient falls out of the trial, do you have to start all over, or because you mentioned this number 600 in the announcement? So if some of these data is being lost for some reason, do you have to start all over, or how do you come about that?
Yeah, so the 600 number was a conservative number. So it was based on the prevalence of AKI in the population that we were going after. We anticipated some patients would fall out. So, our target was actually, I believe, like 25 to 30% higher than, if every patient was usable. The other thing that we're doing is keeping the enrollment sites open. What I mean by that is not necessarily closing the enrollment sites, just in case we need additional data. The last thing, though, we wanted to do was close the enrollment sites and then have to restart if there's some reason or another that we had to go back and get additional data. So we're keeping them open just in case.
The question
it's all about the risk managed approach that we've tried to take with the business overall since we started. Okay.
There's a question relating to the comparison of the earlier attempts to submit and just to what makes you more confident that this time it's for real and you're finally ready with all the data? What makes you think it's different?
Just one word: alignment with the FDA. If we look at the past submissions, that alignment with the FDA was not there. And in some cases, the FDA made some suggestions that the company didn't move forward on. Also, how do I want to say? I think we were looking for too much all at once. So going after, adult indications, both urine and serum as sample types, we were looking to get a lot out of a submission, and all of that requires more data. I think we have a very focused submission with pediatric and urine samples, and that gives us some level of confidence. But like I said, if I were to put one word to it, it would be alignment.
Okay. Great.
Yeah, and in fact, Henrik, that focus on patients that are from 3 months up to age 22, that was the population the FDA asked the company to focus on first. That's part of that alignment Tony's talking about.
Okay. Given that you submit in Q4, during Q4 this year, is it the normal 150-day response time from FDA, or you have this breakthrough designation? Does that change that, or will they? When do you expect FDA to respond?
Yeah, so those are two different questions, right? So in terms of, I'll start with the breakthrough designation. The breakthrough designation basically gives you a priority. It gets you to the front of the line when you look at the inbox that the FDA has to deal with and which applications they need to review. So what the FDA has told us, and they've told the industry, is they are reviewing COVID applications for anything related to COVID, and then secondly, any breakthrough designations, and then anything after that will get a third priority. So that's, which submission they'll open up first. The second question is, will it shorten the time for FDA review? The answer is likely not, because we are performing a de novo submission. We're the first test of this kind. The FDA is looking for more data, and also there is not a gold standard out there, right? This clinical trial would have been a lot easier if there was a gold standard that we could compare ourselves to, but there wasn't. So it's a complex trial. They have to look at a lot of data. It's likely they'll take their time. The 150 days is the FDA's guidance of how fast they will respond. And as I've indicated before, the response could be, we need more data. We need some clarification on this data. And the clock stops whenever they ask that question. And then we need to respond very, very quickly. And that response could be just answering a question, or it could be collecting more data.
Good. Of course, this is an important milestone for you to complete this enrollment for pediatrics. But from a commercial standpoint, the bigger market is, of course, adults. So what will happen after here? Now that what can we expect in terms of use that as going to go for the adult indication?
Yeah, so the beauty of getting the first indication is it provides the standard for the future. So after the submission, we will focus on exactly what the indication will be for the next submission. It will be adult, right? It will be adult. We have to make a determination as to whether it's an adult for risk assessment or it's an adult for diagnostic for certain disease states, like post-cardiac surgery. We are assembling a scientific advisory board to assist us in that decision. Of course, the total market opportunity will be considered when we look at, what that next indication is going to be. But the next indication definitely will be an adult indication of some sort.
Okay.
Yeah, important to understand in that, while certainly our team, assuming we get this approval for this age range, has us focused on and only permitted to sell for the age range of 3 months up to, but not including age 22. We use the word pediatric, but pediatric includes young adults. And there are certainly young adults that are in intensive care units, not just in pediatric intensive care units or PICUs. And we'll certainly go after both of those because we're permitted to do so.
And as you go for some of these adult indications, just to get a better understanding of how much time can you save now that you've done the sort of the work with pediatrics. So is there anything you can reuse of these data, or what should we expect?
Yeah, so we'll have to collect some adult samples, but there are some adult samples that could be available to us. In which case, again, which kind of depending on the type of indication we're moving forward with, could be existing samples that are out there that we can leverage, or it can be a new trial. The two things that we're doing with this pediatric submission is we're establishing what the gold standard is, right? So we're establishing when we say an NGAL level is this, it truly is this. All of that won't need to be, that analytical testing won't need to be redone. The next one will likely be a 510K submission versus a de novo submission. So there's less data that's required. This first one is always tough. De novo is always the toughest of all of them.
Okay, but are you able to in any way to put sort of a timeline as to what we should expect regarding the process for the adult submission?
Not yet. I'm not going to guide to that yet until until we make a decision on which adult submission that we'll make, and we analyze those timelines ourselves. Okay.
Then there are some questions relating to the potential competition for this, as there has been delays previously. Some might be concerned that competitors will catch up, or as one question here is chasing you, so you don't have that much advance from a time perspective. But what are your thoughts on that, the potential competing?
Yeah, so we don't know of anybody that's actively developing an NGAL test for the U.S. market today. That being said, a big part of our commercialization and market adoption strategy will be medical education, right? And will be driving up the interest in the test. I suspect that, once we start to drive interest in the test, that's when competitors will start to take a look at this and make a determination as to whether they will develop their own NGAL test. That That being said, it takes a long time to develop to develop a test, and it all starts with the right antibodies and antigens to actually clone and develop the reagents, and that takes some time. Okay. It takes years. It takes years, not months.
Okay.
Yeah, and to your point, Henrik, one of the things that we're very excited about, and as we announced about a week ago, is that Dr. Prasad Devarajan has joined us as a senior medical director. NGAL is almost his middle name. It is almost his middle name. He is, is one of the co-discoverers of what that biomarker is and what it can mean. And we're certainly expectant that will, because of his reputation and his knowledge and expertise, be very value creating as it relates to our customers, the clinicians, the education that Tony is talking about, as well as coordinating with Dr. Chris Bird, our Chief Medical Officer, on the Scientific Advisory Board that Tony described, as we look at focusing on what the next indications will look like in the adult area.
Yeah, I've been meaning to ask about that, what he actually brings to the table in terms of, because it's my understanding he will work part-time for BioPorto and remain as CEO for the pediatric hospital in yeah.
Yes, he is the chief of nephrology and hypertension at Cincinnati Children's Hospital today. As Neil indicated, this is the world-renowned expert when it comes to pediatric nephrology. He has the respect of pediatric nephrologists as well as critical care clinicians around the world, and he will be helping us develop that education, that set of education materials, talking on our behalf. At the various conferences and forums where, critical care clinicians listen to these types of things. So he will be, very important as we go to commercialize, and absolutely, like I said, a very well-respected resource for us.
But would it be fair to say that he would primarily be a value to you as a company from a commercial and educational point of view? It's not like the fact that he's on board with you makes the process relating to FDA any easier.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. So the FDA is not going to look at this appointment and say we need to approve this submission. But his real value is that he's a practicing clinician that uses his test for clinical care, right? So he can talk about his own practice. He can talk about how to implement a program if you don't have an NGAL program today, right? And I think that's really important as we roll this out, because this is an incremental test to the lab. It doesn't replace anything that's in the lab, but it is very, very valuable when it comes to reducing overall length of stay, reducing the overall cost of handling a AKI patient, and it reduces the amount of renal replacement therapy that could potentially be used for a patient that doesn't necessarily need it.
So, but has he in any way, since he's known to be the primary expert within the field, has he in any way affected the development of the NGAL test in any way, in the sense that the things he proposed a good NGAL test will be, that has been included in the test, or how it's been developed? Or
yeah, he's very well aware of the way we designed the test and very supportive of the way we designed our trials. But he will be very important as we look at the next indications. Even though he's a pediatric nephrologist, there is a lot of parallels with the adult populations. Will be helpful there, as well as the many adult clinicians, critical care clinicians that will involve in the Scientific Advisory Board.
Okay. Now, of course, the big focus is for the NGAL test, and that is what we've talked about. But that you do have other things in your portfolio, and you previously done the COVID-19 test and the sepsis test. So just a few words on that. Are they on standby, or what should we expect?
So the COVID test is still very much in that discovery phase. We haven't moved it from discovery to development, and to be honest with you, I want the development team focused on the NGAL test for this time period, right? So even though we haven't necessarily closed that project or stopped that project, we're still investigating the COVID test, and if we find something that is very exciting, we will need to invest in it and add resources to take it to market. But at this point in time, we are not giving it to our current development team to develop it into a product. The sepsis test, and just to clarify, the sepsis test is really the thrombomodulin biomarker that occurs when there's endothelial damage as a result of sepsis. That one, the Rigshospitalet is still doing their testing. The interim data was good, but we're still waiting for them to put out the final report on the testing that they're doing.
Okay. Just as you are trying to leverage the data from the pediatric trials to going for the adult indication, to what extent can you use that to go outside hospitals for emergency setting and what you call certain outpatient settings? What's the priority of going to those markets?
Yeah, so this right now, our test is run on core lab instruments, clinical chemistry instruments in the core lab. So even though we've had started in the past the development on these dipsticks that could be used for outpatient populations, our focus right now is on the core lab reagents. So the idea is, let's go after these in-hospital markets or inpatient markets and then expand from that. So that's a patient population expansion that we can explore after we get our next adult indication out there.
Okay. It's just that I know some would argue that in the hospitals you also on the equipment you use, you also meet potential competitors for tests from the likes of Roche, Abbott, and those, whereas these companies will most likely not go for the emergency settings and certain outdoor settings.
Well, yeah. So for one thing, we need to make those instrument manufacturers our partners, right? So we don't manufacture our own instrument. We need to be reliant on those. And in fact, earlier this week, we were with Roche senior leadership talking about commercialization in the U.S., what roles and responsibilities each party is going to play, so that we can leverage their number of sales reps that they have throughout the U.S., right? And those are hundreds of sales reps that we don't necessarily have, that we would have to invest in. So how do we leverage that and then utilize our team to provide the medical education out there? So I see us working hand in hand with those manufacturers moving forward.
So at this point, they are more partners than potential competitors.
Absolutely.
They're strategic partners.
Okay.
Strategic partners. Yep.
Time is running, but just a final question relating to the current environment within biotech is, of course, challenging a lot of your colleagues to raise capital and so on. You just did it and have a good position in that regard at this point, but down the line, I expect that you will have to consider perhaps to raise capital again, or what are your considerations as to the current environment and to when you will need capital again?
Well, so Henrik, it's a process that is done over time. I guess I'll start by directly answering your question that we haven't set a specific timeline, an amount, or a process or structure. But what we have done, and what some of our shareholders, I should start by saying, we're very appreciative of the support that we received in the rights offering from our longtime shareholders, and that's enabling us to reach the milestone that we announced last night. So that's very, very important to recognize. Looking forward, what some may have noticed in our announcements over the last couple of weeks is, in addition to our longstanding investor relations colleague, Tim Erickson from Zenith Advisory, who's very attentive to all of our shareholders here in Copenhagen and Denmark. And I'm in Hellerup right now. I'm not in the States. We've recently engaged with a firm called Life Sci Advisors, and they are one of the preeminent life sciences investor relation firms in the States. And as we have said, we are focused also on the U.S. capital markets as a source, not the only source, but as a source for capital for this company as it moves forward and achieves all the great things we hope and expect to do that we've been talking about today. And that's the start of doing that and working towards that process. And when there's more to talk about for that, at the right time, we'll do that.
Okay, sounds interesting. Okay, but gentlemen, I think we are about run out of time. So thank you very much for participating, and also to the audience for all the good questions. And we'll be looking forward to hear more about the submission later this year. So Tony Perret and Neil Goldman, thank you very much.
Thank you, Henrik.
Thank you.
Have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Enjoy the holidays.
Thank you.